Elias Ward, a single father drowning in exhaustion after 2 relentless years of juggling parenthood and the demands of his office job, was simply trying to deliver a report on time. He envisioned a quick drop-off, a silent nod, and a return to the mountain of paperwork threatening to bury him alive. But when his weary hand pushed open the wrong door, the gears of his meticulously constructed life ground to a halt. The room beyond was not the sterile, impersonal conference room he expected. Instead, it was a private sanctuary, and within it stood Marion Vale, the formidable CEO whose name echoed through the corridors of Valiant Dynamics like a queen's decree. She was in the midst of changing, caught completely off guard, utterly unprepared for an audience. It was an impossible moment, a collision of 2 worlds that were never meant to intersect. And in that instant, Elias's job, his carefully planned future, and even the quiet, guarded corners of his heart were all teetering on the precipice of utter chaos. He stumbled back, his face burning with mortification, finding himself pressed against the cool wall of the hallway. His hands, clammy and trembling, betrayed his inner turmoil. The report folder, containing the very document that had led him to this disastrous encounter, lay forgotten somewhere near his feet, a silent testament to his professional demise. He was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to draw a full breath, his mind a broken record replaying the image seared into his memory. Marion Vale, half-dressed, her gaze sharp and unforgiving, those cold gray eyes piercing him like shards of ice. He was done for, finished. 2 years of dedicated service at Valiant Dynamics, erased in a mere 3 seconds of unintended voyeurism. The building hummed around him, oblivious to his personal catastrophe. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, distant voices echoed from unseen corners, and the faint, almost imperceptible ping of elevator doors punctuated the silence. Everything felt surreal, distorted, like the agonizing moment before a car crash. When time stretches thin, and you see every detail unfolding in excruciating slow motion, yet remain powerless to stop the inevitable. A woman from accounting, a familiar face he vaguely recognized, walked past. She cast a fleeting glance in his direction but didn't slow her pace, offering no acknowledgement of the silent drama unfolding before her. Elias forced himself to move, to break free from the spell of embarrassment and impending doom. He bent down, retrieved the fallen folder, straightened his tie, a futile attempt to regain some semblance of composure. He walked toward the elevator with legs that felt foreign, detached from his body. He had woken up that morning as he did every morning. The jarring shriek of the 5:30 alarm clock, a rude awakening to the responsibilities of single fatherhood. Ari's small voice, filtering in from the next room, asking the hopeful question, "Is it Pancake Day?" It wasn't Pancake Day. It was never Pancake Day on Tuesdays. But she asked anyway, because she was 6 years old, endlessly hopeful, and still possessed the unwavering belief that her father could conjure miracles from thin air, even before his first cup of coffee. He had kissed her forehead, a silent promise to protect her from the harsh realities of the world. He made toast, meticulously cutting off the crusts the way she liked, packed her lunch with the care and precision of a seasoned chef. He drove her to school, listening to her sing along to some saccharine pop song about butterflies, her voice slightly off-key but full of unadulterated joy. He dropped her off, watching her run toward the school gate, her small backpack bouncing against her back. That image always stayed with him, a constant reminder of what truly mattered. The backpack, seemingly too large for her small frame, the way she never looked back, secure in the unwavering belief that he would always be there when she emerged at the end of the day. Then he had driven to Valiant Dynamics, parked in the far reaches of the lot, a privilege reserved for senior staff who lorded over the closer spaces. He rode the elevator to the 8th floor, settled at his desk in the forgotten corner of the open office plan, a space where he blended seamlessly into the background, unnoticed unless something went terribly wrong. That was his life. Wake up. Keep Ari alive and thriving. Keep his job. Repeat. He was never supposed to be anywhere near the executive floor today. But his manager had called in sick, succumbing to the latest office plague. The quarterly report, A crucial document detailing the company's performance needed to be delivered. Someone had to do it. Elias had volunteered, as he always did, driven by an unwavering need to be the reliable one. The one who stepped up, the one who never complained, even when his shoulders ached with the weight of responsibility. Conference Room B, 14th floor. That was all his manager had said, his voice muffled by congestion and regret. Elias had taken the elevator, the silence amplifying the dread creeping through him. He walked down the pristine hallway, lined with glass walls and abstract art that probably cost more than his annual salary. He checked his watch. 7 minutes until the board meeting, plenty of time to spare. He had reached for the door handle, pushed it open, and his life had irrevocably imploded. Now he sat in his car in the nearly deserted parking lot, the sun beating down on the windshield, turning the interior into a sweltering oven. It was nearly noon. He had no conscious memory of leaving the building, no recollection of the long, agonizing walk to his car. His dark hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. His phone buzzed, the shrill sound cutting through his daze. A text from the school. A reminder about early dismissal on Friday. He deleted it without a second thought, unable to process anything beyond the immediate crisis. His hands were still shaking, a physical manifestation of the emotional earthquake that had shattered his carefully constructed world. Marion Vale didn't know his name. She had never even looked at him before today, at least not that he was aware of. She was a figure glimpsed in company-wide emails, a fleeting presence in the glass-walled conference rooms on the top floor, a name celebrated in the annual reports that boasted another record-breaking year. She wore impeccably tailored suits, spoke in clipped, precise sentences, and fired people with the dispassionate efficiency of someone canceling a subscription service. The company, in hushed whispers and furtive glances, referred to her as the Ice Queen. Never to her face, of course, but everyone knew. Everyone felt the chill that emanated from her. Elias had seen her once in the lobby, a brief, fleeting encounter. She had walked past him without a flicker of recognition, her gaze fixed on some distant point. He had felt small, insignificant, utterly invisible, which, in his carefully orchestrated life, was perfectly fine. Invisible was safe. He was not invisible anymore. His phone rang again, the insistent sound demanding his attention. Unknown number. He hesitated, his finger hovering over the answer button. He let it go to voicemail, hoping it was a wrong number, a cruel joke. It rang again. Same number. This time he reluctantly answered. Mr. Ward, this is Tessa from Executive Affairs. Miss Vale would like to see you in her office at 2 p.m. today. 14th floor, Suite A. Please confirm. Elias opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. He was a marionette with severed strings, unable to articulate a response. The woman on the phone waited patiently, her silence amplifying his mounting anxiety. I'll be there, he finally managed to croak, the words barely audible. The line went dead, leaving him alone with his dread. He sat in the car for another 20 minutes, lost in a labyrinth of worst-case scenarios. Then, with a heavy sigh, he started the engine and drove to a nearby coffee shop, seeking solace in caffeine and anonymity. He ordered something he didn't drink, the bitter liquid tasting like ashes in his mouth. He sat by the window watching people walk past, normal people with normal problems, people who hadn't just committed career suicide before lunchtime. At 1:45, driven by a strange mixture of fear and morbid curiosity, he drove back to Valiant Dynamics, parked in his designated spot in the outer reaches of the lot, took the elevator, and walked down the hallway towards Suite A. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of impending doom. The door was solid wood, expensive, a clear indication of the power and influence that resided within. A small, understated plaque read, Marion Vale, Chief Executive Officer. He knocked, the sound echoing in the silent hallway. Come in. Her voice was calm, controlled, betraying no hint of the chaos he had unleashed earlier that morning. It was the same voice that had uttered not a single word when he had stumbled backward and slammed the door shut. his face a mask of horror. Elias stepped inside, his senses overwhelmed. The office was larger than his entire apartment, a testament to the vast gulf that separated their lives. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a glittering landscape of ambition and success. Minimalist furniture, sleek and modern, adorned the space, and a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black marble dominated the room. Marion sat behind it, an imposing figure radiating power and authority. She wore a different suit now, charcoal gray, perfectly pressed, exuding an air of effortless sophistication. Her dark hair was pulled back elegantly, accentuating her high cheekbones and the sharp angles of her face. Her deep brown skin was luminous in the afternoon light. Her expression was unreadable, a carefully constructed mask that revealed nothing of her inner thoughts. "Sit," she commanded, her tone brooking no argument. He sat, his muscles tense, his body poised for flight. She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. He tried to meet her eyes, to offer some semblance of an apology, but failed. Instead, he stared at the polished edge of her desk, focusing on the intricate grain of the wood, anything to avoid the intensity of her stare. "Mr. Ward, you delivered the quarterly report this morning." "Yes," he managed to stammer, the word barely audible. "You were supposed to leave it in conference room B." "Yes," he repeated, his voice cracking with nervousness. "Yes, I know. Yes, you did not leave it in conference room B." Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. He wanted to explain, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. "No, I opened the wrong door. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. It was a mistake. Terrible mistake." She held up one hand, silencing him. He stopped talking, his heart pounding in his chest. "I read your proposal last month," Marion said, her gaze still fixed on him. "The one about streamlining client onboarding." Elias blinked, taken aback by the sudden change in subject. He had almost forgotten about that proposal, a passion project he had poured his heart and soul into, only to have it dismissed by his manager as unrealistic and overly ambitious. "Your manager dismissed it," she continued, her voice devoid of judgment. "Said it was too ambitious for someone at your level." Elias swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had no idea where this was going, but a flicker of hope, faint and fragile, began to ignite within him. "I disagreed," she said, her tone firm. "I thought it showed initiative, clear thinking, an understanding of our inefficiencies that most senior staff don't have." She opened a folder on her desk, her movements precise and deliberate. She slid a single sheet of paper across to him. "I'm launching a pilot program, 6 months, small team. Your proposal as the foundation. I want you to lead it." Elias stared at the paper, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. It was a project outline, detailing the scope, objectives, and expected outcomes of the pilot program. His name was already typed at the top, designated as the project lead. I don't understand," he stammered, his voice filled with disbelief. Marion leaned back in her chair, her expression unchanged. "This morning was unfortunate for both of us, but it doesn't change the fact that you have a good idea and this company needs good ideas. I don't make business decisions based on embarrassment. I make them based on value. You have value. Do you want the position or not?" Elias's brain could not process what was happening. He had walked in here expecting to be fired, possibly escorted out by security. Instead, he was being handed the opportunity he had been hoping for since he started working at Valiant Dynamics. The chance to prove himself, to make a real difference, to escape the monotony of his dead-end job. "I want it," he said, his voice firm, determined. "Good," she said, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. "You'll report directly to me. We'll meet twice a week to review progress. I expect results. I expect professionalism. I expect you to prove that my decision was correct. Understood?" "Understood," he affirmed, his voice filled with newfound confidence. She stood, extended her hand. He stood as well, shook it. Her grip was firm, brief, conveying both authority and a surprising level of strength. Tessa will send you the details. Your first meeting is Thursday at 9 a.m. Don't be late. I won't be, he promised, his heart soaring with hope. He turned to leave, eager to escape the confines of her office and process the extraordinary turn of events. Mr. Ward. He stopped, looked back. Marianne's expression was still unreadable, but something in her eyes had shifted, softened, just slightly. The door was unlocked, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I should have locked it. The mistake was not entirely yours. He did not know how to respond to that unexpected concession. So he simply nodded, his mind racing, and left the office, walked down the hallway in a daze. The elevator doors closed, sealing him in a metal box of disbelief and burgeoning hope. He leaned against the wall, let out a breath he had been holding for hours. His phone buzzed, pulling him back to reality. A reminder. Pick up Ari at 3:15. He checked his watch. He had time. Elias drove to the school, parked, and waited, his anxiety slowly dissipating. When Ari came running out, her backpack bouncing against her small back, he scooped her up and held her tight, burying his face in her hair. Daddy, you're squishing me, she said, giggling. Sorry, kiddo. Just happy to see you. He sat her down, opened the car door, helped her into her booster seat. Did you have a good day? Yeah, we learned about butterflies. Did you have a good day? She asked, her bright eyes searching his face. Elias looked at his daughter, her eager face, her complete trust that the world was good and her father would keep it that way. He thought about the morning, the disastrous encounter, the unexpected opportunity. Yeah, he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. I think I did. He had no idea what came next, but for the first time in 2 years, he felt something other than exhaustion, something other than the crushing weight of responsibility. He felt hope. The first meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. Elias arrived at 8:45, his stomach churning with a mixture of nerves and excitement. He sat in the waiting area outside Marianne's office, meticulously reviewing the portfolio of notes he had stayed up until midnight preparing. His tie felt too tight, constricting his airway. He loosened it, then tightened it again, a nervous tic he couldn't control. Tessa glanced at him from her desk, her expression neutral, but said nothing. At exactly 9 a.m., the office door opened. Marianne stood in the doorway, an imposing figure in her sharp suit, her expression unreadable. Come in, she said, her voice businesslike. He followed her inside, his heart pounding in his chest. She gestured to the small conference table by the window. He sat, his back straight, his posture perfect. She sat across from him, her gaze intense. Walk me through your implementation strategy, Marianne said, her tone demanding. Elias opened his portfolio, began talking, laying out his plan with precision and detail. She listened without interrupting, her eyes fixed on him, analyzing his every word, every gesture. He could not tell if she was impressed, bored, or calculating how quickly she could replace him if he failed. When he finished, she tapped one finger against the table, a silent punctuation mark. Your timeline is optimistic, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. I can adjust it, he offered, his confidence wavering slightly. Don't adjust it. Optimism is useful. Just be prepared for delays. She pulled out her own folder, slid a budget breakdown across to him. The numbers were higher than he expected. Significantly higher. You'll have access to these resources. Use them wisely. I don't tolerate waste. Understood? Understood, he affirmed, his voice firm. They worked through logistics for the next hour, dissecting every detail, planning every contingency. Software needs, personnel allocation, reporting structures. It was all business, professional, efficient. But every time their eyes met, Elias felt the weight of what had happened on Tuesday, the memory of the open door, the frozen moment, the mortification. If Marianne felt it too, she did not show it, her composure unwavering. When the meeting ended, she stood, extended her hand. He shook it, her grip firm, brief, the same as before. Next meeting is Monday. Same time. Bring preliminary data. I will, he promised, his voice filled with determination. He left, walked back to his desk on the 8th floor, the weight of the meeting settling upon his shoulders. His coworker Caspian leaned over the partition, a sly grin on his face. Heard you got a promotion, working directly with Vale now. Something like that, Elias replied, his tone non-committal. Caspian whistled low, impressed. Rather you than me. That woman doesn't smile, ever. Good luck, man. Elias did not respond. He opened his laptop and got to work, determined to prove that he deserved this opportunity, that he could succeed, that he was more than just the guy who walked in on the CEO changing. The second meeting went the same way. Professional, focused, demanding. No mention of Tuesday, the third meeting, the fourth. By the end of the second week, Elias had stopped checking his tie every 5 minutes, stopped rehearsing his updates in the elevator. He had fallen into a rhythm, a routine of hard work, meticulous planning, and constant communication. Marianne was demanding but fair. She asked hard questions, expected clear answers, but she also listened. Actually listened, which was more than most executives did. She valued results, but she also valued initiative, creativity, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. On the 5th meeting, something shifted, a subtle change in the atmosphere. Elias was explaining a bottleneck in the client intake process, his voice animated with passion, when Marianne's phone buzzed, disrupting the flow of the conversation. She glanced at it, frowned, and silenced it, her annoyance barely perceptible. 2 minutes later, it buzzed again, the insistent vibration demanding her attention. She ignored it, her focus unwavering. Continue, she said, her gaze fixed on Elias. He continued, but he could sense her distraction, a subtle shift in her demeanor. The phone buzzed a third time, relentless in its persistence. Marianne picked it up, her jaw tightening as she read the message. Excuse me, she said, her voice clipped. She stood, walked to the window, turned her back to him, and answered the call, her words sharp and decisive. Mother, I told you I'm in a meeting. No, I'm not coming to the gala. We discussed this. I have a company to run. Goodbye. She ended the call, stood there for a moment with her back to him, her shoulders tense. When she turned around, her expression was smooth again, controlled, but Elias had seen the crack, just for a second. A fleeting glimpse into the private world behind the Ice Queen's facade. Where were we? She asked, her voice regaining its composure. The intake process, he replied, his mind still replaying the scene he had just witnessed. They finished the meeting, but something had changed, a subtle shift in his perception of her. She was not just the Ice Queen anymore, a heartless corporate automaton. She was a person with a mother who called during work hours, a life outside these glass walls, a vulnerability that she tried so hard to conceal. The next meeting, Marianne asked about his daughter, a casual, almost throwaway question at the end of their discussion. How old is your daughter? Elias looked up from his notes, surprised by the unexpected inquiry. 6. Her name is Ari. Child care must be difficult with the schedule, she observed, her tone neutral. I manage, he replied, reluctant to reveal the struggles and sacrifices that went into juggling his career and his responsibilities as a single father. My neighbor helps when I work late. Marianne nodded, did not elaborate, but the fact that she asked at all felt significant, a sign that she was seeing him not just as an employee, but as a person. By the 4th week, they had fallen into a comfortable rhythm, a routine of meetings, progress reports, and shared insights. The meetings were still professional, but the edges had softened. Marianne made a dry joke about corporate bureaucracy. Elias laughed, genuinely amused. She almost smiled. Almost. One afternoon, they ended a meeting early, having resolved all the outstanding issues. Elias stood to leave, eager to get home to Ari. Marianne glanced at her watch, her brow furrowed in thought. Have you had lunch? He had not. He had been so focused on the meeting that he had forgotten to eat. No, he admitted, his stomach growling softly. There's a decent place 2 blocks down, she said, her tone neutral. We can continue the discussion there. It was not an invitation. It was an extension of the meeting, a way to maximize productivity. That was what Elias told himself as they rode the elevator down together, the silence amplifying the awkwardness of the situation. As they walked side by side through the lobby, the curious glances of their colleagues boring into them, as they sat across from each other in a quiet bistro where the tables had actual tablecloths and the menu did not list prices. He tried to maintain a professional distance, to treat it like any other business lunch. They talked about the project, market trends, competitor analysis, the usual corporate jargon. Then Marian asked about Ari again, her curiosity piqued. What does she want to be when she grows up? Elias smiled, his face softening. Last week it was a veterinarian. This week it's an astronaut. Next week it'll be something else. She sounds adaptable, Marian observed, a hint of amusement in her voice. She is. She has to be. Marian set down her fork, her gaze meeting his. How long have you been on your own? 2 years, he replied, his voice tinged with sadness. Her mother left when Ari was 4, decided parenthood wasn't for her. I haven't heard from her since. He had not meant to say that much, to reveal such a personal detail, but Marianne's expression had shifted, something gentler, something almost like understanding. That must be difficult, she said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. It is, but Ari is worth it. She's the only thing that makes sense. Marian looked at him for a long moment, her gaze intense, as if she was trying to decipher the depths of his soul. Then she picked up her fork again, breaking the spell. You're doing well with the project. Better than I expected. Thank you, he replied, his heart soaring with pride. They finished lunch, walked back to the office, and did not mention the personal details they had shared. But the next week, she suggested lunch again. And the week after that, it became routine. Meetings, lunch, conversations that started about work and drifted into other things, personal anecdotes, shared observations, fleeting moments of vulnerability. Marian mentioned her mother's relentless social calendar, the endless galas and charity events she was obligated to attend. Elias talked about Ari's obsession with building blanket forts, the elaborate constructions that transformed their small apartment into a magical kingdom. Neither of them acknowledged what was happening, that the walls were coming down, that the Ice Queen was melting, that they were slowly, tentatively, building a connection that transcended the boundaries of their professional relationship. Then came the afternoon in late October, a day that would forever be etched in his memory. Elias was in Marianne's office, reviewing quarterly projections, his mind focused on the numbers, when his phone rang, the shrill sound cutting through the silence. He glanced at the screen, the school. He silenced it, assuming it was just a routine notification. 30 seconds later, it rang again, insistent, persistent. Same number. Answer it, Marian said, her gaze fixed on his face. He did, his heart pounding in his chest. Hello, Mr. Ward. This is Principal Garner. Ari is in the office. She says no one came to pick her up. We've been calling your emergency contact, but there's no answer. Elias's stomach dropped, his blood running cold. He had been so engrossed in the presentation, so focused on impressing Marianne, that he had completely forgotten the most important thing in his life. What time is it? He asked, his voice trembling. School dismissal was at 3:15. He had forgotten, completely forgotten. He had been so focused on the presentation that he had lost track of time. His neighbor was supposed to pick up Ari today, but his neighbor wasn't answering. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Elias said, his voice filled with panic. He stood, grabbed his jacket, his movements frantic. I'm so sorry. I have to go. I'll send the updated numbers tonight. He was halfway to the door when Marian spoke, her voice calm, controlled. I'll drive you. He turned, his face etched with disbelief. What? She was already standing, already reaching for her coat. Her movements efficient and decisive. Your car is in the far lot. Mine is in the executive garage. We'll be there faster. Come on. They took the elevator to the underground garage, the silence broken only by the hum of the machinery. Marianne's car was a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Elias's annual salary, a symbol of her wealth and success. She drove with the same precision she brought to everything else. Her hands steady on the wheel, her eyes focused on the road. Efficient, controlled, but fast. Elias called the school, told them he was on the way, his voice trembling with anxiety. His hands were shaking, his palms slick with sweat. He had never forgotten Ari. Not once in 2 years. He was the reliable one, the one who showed up, the one who never let her down. "She'll be fine," Marianne said, her voice calm, steady, reassuring. "I forgot her," he repeated, his voice filled with self-reproach. "You were working. It happens." "It shouldn't happen," he insisted, his guilt overwhelming him. Marianne glanced at him, her gaze surprisingly gentle. "You're not a bad father because you lost track of time once. You're human." They pulled up in front of the school, the scene unfolding before them like a recurring nightmare. Elias jumped out, ran inside, his heart pounding in his chest. Ari was sitting in the office with her backpack on her lap, her small body slumped with disappointment. Her face was red, her eyes swollen. She had been crying. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice thick with tears. He scooped her up, held her tight, burying his face in her hair, his guilt overwhelming him. "I'm so sorry, kiddo. I'm so sorry." "You forgot me?" she said into his shoulder, her voice choked with emotion. "I know, baby. I know I messed up. It won't happen again." He carried her outside, his legs weak with relief. Marianne was standing by the car, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Ari looked at her with wide, curious eyes, her fear slowly subsiding. "Who's that?" Ari whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's Miss Vale. She works with Daddy. She gave us a ride." Marianne stepped forward, crouched down so she was eye level with Ari, her movements surprisingly gentle. "Hello, Ari. I've heard a lot about you." Ari studied her, her gaze searching, analyzing. "You're pretty," she declared, her voice filled with childlike honesty. A smile flickered across Marianne's face, genuine, brief, but real. "Thank you. You're very pretty too. Do you like butterflies?" Ari's eyes widened, her face lighting up. "I do. Do you want to see my butterfly drawing? I made it in art class." "I would love to," Marianne said, her voice filled with warmth. Ari climbed into the back seat, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, showed it to Marianne. They looked at it together, Marianne asking questions, Ari answering, and for the first time since Elias had met her, Marianne looked completely at ease, her composure relaxed, her eyes filled with genuine interest. She drove them home, the atmosphere in the car surprisingly comfortable. Elias tried to apologize again for the inconvenience, for disrupting her day, for putting her in this awkward situation. Marianne waved him off, dismissing his apologies. "It was no inconvenience," she insisted. They pulled up in front of Elias's apartment building, a modest structure that had seen better decades. It was not much, a small 2-bedroom in a complex that housed a diverse mix of families and struggling individuals. Ari unbuckled her seatbelt, leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "Do you want to come inside? We have juice boxes." Marianne looked at Elias, her expression unreadable. He should say no, should thank her and let her leave, should maintain the professional distance that separated their lives. But he didn't. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Driven by a desperate need to show his gratitude, to share a part of his life with her. "You're welcome to come in," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned off the engine, her decision made. Inside, the apartment was small but clean, a reflection of Elias's unwavering dedication to providing a comfortable home for his daughter. Ari's drawings covered the refrigerator, a colorful collage of butterflies, flowers, and stick figures. Her toys were scattered across the living room floor, a testament to her boundless energy and imagination. Marianne did not seem to notice the mess. She sat on the couch while Ari brought her a juice box and 3 more butterfly drawings, eager to share her creations. Elias made coffee, stood in the kitchen, and watched them, his heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Marian listened to Ari talk about her day with the same focus and attention she brought to board meetings, her gaze unwavering, her questions insightful. She asked follow-up questions, laughed at Ari's jokes, and Ari, who was usually shy around strangers, blossomed under the attention, her confidence growing with each passing moment. An hour later, Ari yawned, her eyelids drooping with fatigue. Elias checked the time. Almost 6 p.m. "Bath time, kiddo," he announced, his voice filled with affection. "Can Miss Marianne stay for dinner?" Ari pleaded, her eyes wide with hope. Elias looked at Marianne, his heart pounding in his chest. She met his eyes, her gaze searching, analyzing. Something unspoken passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that was growing between them. "I should go," Marianne said, her voice hesitant. But she didn't stand up, her body language betraying her words. "Please stay," Ari begged, her voice filled with entreaty. "Daddy makes good spaghetti." Marianne smiled, her eyes softening. "I'm sure he does." She stayed. Elias cooked, his movements efficient and practiced. Marianne helped Ari set the table, her touch surprisingly gentle. They ate together, the conversation easy, light, comfortable. Ari asked Marianne about her job, her curiosity insatiable. Marianne answered in terms a 6-year-old could understand, explaining her role in the company with patience and clarity. Ari told stories about school, her voice animated, her gestures dramatic. Marianne listened intently, her gaze fixed on Ari, her face radiating warmth. After dinner, Elias put Ari to bed, tucking her in, kissing her forehead, and whispering sweet dreams. When he came back to the living room, Marianne was standing by the door with her coat on, her silhouette framed by the dim light. "Thank you for today," Elias said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You already thanked me 3 times, she replied, a hint of amusement in her voice. "I know, but I mean it," he insisted, his gaze unwavering. She looked at him, her expression pensive, the same way she had looked at him in the restaurant, in the car, in the office, like she was seeing something she hadn't expected to find. A depth, a vulnerability, a genuine goodness that touched her soul. "She's wonderful," Marianne said, her voice soft, filled with admiration. "You're doing a good job." "I forgot to pick her up," he said, his voice tinged with guilt. "And you fixed it. That's what matters." They stood in the doorway, the space between them feeling smaller than it should, charged with unspoken emotions. "I should let you go," Elias said, his voice hesitant. "Yes, you should," she agreed, her gaze intense. Neither of them moved, their bodies frozen in place, caught in a silent battle between reason and desire. Marianne reached for the door handle, stopped, turned back, her eyes filled with a mix of longing and uncertainty. "The door you opened," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "That Tuesday, maybe it wasn't the wrong door." Elias's breath caught, his heart pounding in his chest. He could not believe what she was suggesting, the implications of her words. "What do you mean?" He stammered, his mind racing. "I mean, maybe it was exactly the door you were supposed to open." She left before he could respond, disappearing into the night, leaving him to grapple with the enormity of her words. Elias stood in the empty hallway, listened to her footsteps fade, closed the door, leaned against it, his body trembling with a mixture of disbelief and exhilaration. Everything had just changed. The carefully constructed boundaries of his life blurred beyond recognition. Over the next 3 weeks, Marianne came to dinner twice more, her presence becoming a familiar and welcome addition to their small family. She brought Ari books about space, about butterflies, about strong women who defied expectations. She sat on the floor and helped build blanket forts, her laughter echoing through the apartment. She laughed at Ari's jokes, her eyes sparkling with genuine amusement, and she looked at Elias when she thought he wasn't watching, her gaze filled with a warmth and tenderness that made his heart soar. He was always watching, always aware of her presence, always drawn to her strength, her intelligence, her unexpected vulnerability. One evening in late November, after Ari was in bed, They sat on the porch, huddled together against the cold. The air was crisp and clean. The street was quiet, the silence broken only by the distant hum of traffic. "I've been thinking," Marian said, her voice soft, contemplative. "About what?" Elias asked, his gaze fixed on her face. "About doors, about mistakes, about the things we tell ourselves to stay safe." Elias looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. "What have you been telling yourself?" "That I don't have time for this. That it's inappropriate. That I'm your boss and you're my employee and there are rules for a reason." "Those are good reasons," Elias acknowledged, his voice hesitant. "They're logical reasons, but they're not the whole truth." "What's the whole truth?" Marian turned to face him, her eyes shining in the dim light. The street light caught her eyes, made them softer, warmer, more vulnerable than he had ever seen them. "The truth is that the door you—" Elias noticed Rowan's smile was a facade, never reaching his eyes. One Thursday, as Elias exited Marianne's office, Rowan emerged from the elevator. A fleeting glance was cast his way, then towards the office door. His face remained neutral, but Elias sensed a sharp, calculating glint in his gaze. "Ward, isn't it? The new project lead?" Rowan inquired. "Yes, sir. Spending a lot of time up here lately," Rowan observed. "The project demands close collaboration," Elias replied, trying to sound confident. Rowan offered a smile, laced with something Elias couldn't quite decipher. "I'm sure it does." He passed by, leaving Elias standing there, a chill creeping into his heart. The following week, Rowan made an appearance at one of their progress meetings. He positioned himself in a corner, silent, observant, scribbling notes. At the meeting's conclusion, he shook Elias's hand, his grip firm. "Impressive work. Very impressive, especially for someone who was filing reports just 2 months ago." Elias forced a smile. "Thank you." After Rowan's departure, Marian shut the door, turning to Elias. "He's fishing," she stated, her voice tight. "For what?" Elias asked, a knot forming in his stomach. "Anything he can use against us. Rowan's been eyeing my position for years. If he thinks he can leverage anything, he will." She paused, then continued, "Should we be worried? We should do nothing differently. We're running a project, delivering results. That's all that matters," Elias countered, hoping to reassure her and himself. But Elias could see the subtle signs of her anxiety, the tension in her shoulders, the clenching of her jaw. She was genuinely worried, and the realization deepened his unease. 2 weeks later, an unscheduled, immediate review was requested by the board. Marianne was summoned to a closed-door session. An hour passed before she returned, her face composed, but her hands were clasped tightly together, knuckles white. "They asked about you," she revealed, her voice barely a whisper. Elias's stomach lurched. What did they ask? Why I entrusted the project to someone with limited experience. Whether my judgment was compromised. If there was any conflict of interest. Her voice was laced with disbelief. "What did you tell them?" Elias pressed. "I told them your results speak for themselves. I presented the data, the client feedback, the efficiency improvements. They have no concrete evidence, just suspicion." She paused, her gaze locking with his. "Suspicion is enough in these circles. Not if we finish strong," Elias stated, his determination hardening. Marian nodded. "The final presentation is in 3 weeks. If you deliver, they'll have to accept that I made the right call." "And if I don't?" Elias replied, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. "Then Rowan wins." Elias threw himself into his work, driven by a potent cocktail of ambition and fear. 18-hour days became the norm. He meticulously refined every detail, rehearsed every slide until he could recite them in his sleep, ran countless scenario analyses until his eyes burned. Marian scrutinized his work, pushing him harder than ever before. Dinners were missed, calls went unmade. Their conversations were limited to terse project updates. The strain was palpable. Ari noticed the change in routine. One night, while Elias was hunched over spreadsheets, She climbed onto his lap, her small hands reaching for his face. "Is Miss Mari mad at us?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "No, kiddo. She's just busy. Does she still like us?" Elias held her close, burying his face in her hair. "She still likes us," he reassured her, but a seed of doubt had been planted in his own mind. The night before the presentation, Elias sat in his apartment, the glow of his laptop illuminating his face. Everything was ready. The numbers were irrefutable. The presentation was flawless, yet his hands trembled. The weight of expectation was crushing. If he failed, he risked losing his job, his hard-earned opportunity. Marianne's credibility would be shattered, and whatever fragile connection they had forged would collapse under the immense pressure of corporate politics. He considered calling her, but ultimately decided against it, fearing he would crack under the strain. He went to bed, but sleep eluded him. The presentation was scheduled for 10 in the morning, with full board attendance. Rowan would be there, a silent judge, waiting for him to falter. Elias arrived at 9, his heart pounding in his chest. Marianne was already in the conference room, her presence a mixture of steel and fragility. She looked at him, her eyes searching. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion. "I think so," Elias replied, hedging. "Think is not good enough," she said, her gaze unwavering. "I'm ready," he affirmed, injecting conviction into his voice. She nodded, a flicker of something akin to pride in her eyes. "Elias, regardless of what happens today, you did excellent work. I want you to know that." Her words sounded like a farewell, and Elias hated the finality in her voice. The board members filed in, taking their seats around the polished table. Rowan positioned himself directly across from Elias, his face adorned with that unsettling, empty smile. Elias began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. He methodically guided them through the intricacies of the new system, showcasing the dramatic improvements in key metrics. Client retention had surged by 22%. Processing time had plummeted by 38%. Revenue per client was up, while costs were down. Every projection had been not only met but exceeded. He fielded questions with confidence, deftly handled the inevitable pushback, and remained composed even when Rowan launched pointed inquiries about resource allocation. Marian remained silent, a watchful observer, allowing him to prove his worth. When he finished, the room was filled with a pregnant silence. The CFO was the first to speak, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "This is solid work, Ward. Better than solid." The head of investor relations nodded in agreement. "I want to implement this company-wide. How soon can we scale?" Rowan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable, and remained silent. Marian rose to her feet, her voice ringing with conviction. "I think that answers your earlier concerns about my judgment. Elias was the right choice. The results prove it." The board concurred. The meeting adjourned. People shook Elias's hand, offering congratulations. Rowan left without uttering a word. Once the room emptied, Marian turned to Elias, a genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time in weeks. "You did it," she said, her voice softening. "We did it," Elias corrected. "No, you did. I just gave you the chance." They stood there, the space between them charged with unspoken emotions, all the things they had held back, the risks they had both taken. "I want to do this right," she said, her voice filled with earnestness. "I want to protect you and Ari. I don't want you to lose your job because of me." Elias's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we wait 6 months. We keep this private. Let the dust settle, and then, when the time is right, we stop hiding." Elias wanted to argue, to protest that 6 months was an eternity, but he understood her reasoning. She was prioritizing their safety, protecting Ari from the fallout. 6 months, he conceded. "And then we build something real." She squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Deal." 6 months later, on a warm evening in late May, Elias stood on his porch, the setting sun casting long shadows. Ari stood beside him, her small hand trustingly clasped in his. Marianne stood on Ari's other side, completing the picture. The three of them stood together, watching the vibrant sunset paint the sky in hues of orange, pink, and gold. Ari held both their hands tightly, a silent plea for unity. She had been persistently asking when Miss Marianne would be moving in, and Elias had consistently reassured her that it would be soon. Not yet, but soon. Earlier that day, Marianne had made it official, informing the board of their relationship. She had weathered the raised eyebrows, the carefully worded questions, standing firm in her decision. Now she was here where she had been every weekend for the past 6 months, where she belonged. "I was thinking," Marianne said quietly, her voice barely audible. Elias turned to her, his heart filled with anticipation. "About what?" "About building something new. The three of us, if you're willing." Ari looked up, her eyes wide with hope. "Does that mean you're staying?" Marianne crouched down, meeting Ari's gaze with tenderness. "If you want me to." "I want you to forever," Ari declared, her voice filled with unwavering certainty. Marianne's smile was soft, genuine. The walls she had erected around her heart completely gone. "Forever sounds perfect," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. She stood, her gaze locking with Elias's. He reached for her hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. "Together," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "Together," she agreed, her voice a mirror of his own. And for the first time since that fateful door opened, since that impossible moment that had threatened to destroy everything, Elias felt truly complete. They had built something real, something that mattered, something worth every risk they had taken. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a soft, golden glow. The three of them stood together, united by love and a shared vision for the future. And nobody wanted to go back to the way things were before.